Go. Now don't stop me. There. That's a smile. Well, it could be. But you're going to have to work on it.
Good evening. Well, there we had Tarzan regarding a voracious Jane in the waterlogged shape of Bo Derek with the bemusement of a small boy who's found a strange new toy in his Christmas stocking and knows it must be a pretty good thing, but isn't at all sure how it works. Will he ever find out? Well, perhaps you'll see later on. Though I must say the prognosis isn't good. After all, any other man in Miles O'Keefe's place will be grinning from ear to ear already. However, it's nice to be back with the first in a new series of Film 81 we're in, as well as reviewing the new Tarzan. I'll be talking about Escape from New York, John Carpenter's violent vision of Manhattan in 1997. Heaven's Gate, Michael Cimino's ludicrously expensive story of cowboys and immigrants in Wyoming in the late 19th century, and by way of light relief, Alan Alda's thoughtful and romantic comedy, The Four Seasons. In addition, we have a report on the making of The French Lieutenant's Woman, which stars Meryl Streep and Jeremy Irons, and is directed by Carol Rice. We'll have the first in a new batch of weekly competitions, and we'll round things off with Michael Caine and Sylvester Stallone making their international soccer debuts in the famous match, Nazis versus Prisoners of War, in Escape to Victory. But we begin with a different kind of escape caper, Escape from New York, which starts off with the interesting premise that in 1997, New York has finally proved totally uninhabitable by any kind of remotely sensitive human being, and has therefore been turned into a vast maximum security prison. Manhattan Island is surrounded by 50-foot walls, the bridges are mined to stop anyone getting out, the police force surrounds the place like a besieging army, and the 3 million population is composed of all the really nasty criminal psychopaths in America. Well, now, into this extremely unpleasant place crashes the plane carrying President Donald Pleasance, who was promptly captured and held to ransom by the very nastiest of the nasties. Police Chief Lee Van Cleef then determines to send in Kurt Russell on a desperate rescue mission.
That's it, Pliskin.
Tell him.
Tell me what?
That idea you had about turning the Gulf fire around 180 degrees and flying off to Canada.
What did you do to me, asshole?
My idea, Pliskin. Something we've been fooling around with. 2 microscopic capsules lodged in your arteries. They're already starting to dissolve. In 22 hours, the cores will completely dissolve. Inside the cores are a heat-sensing charge. Not a large explosive, about the size of a pinhead. Just big enough to open up both your arteries. I'd say you'd be dead in 10 or 15 seconds.
Come out now.
They're protected by the cores. 15 minutes before the last hour's up, we can neutralize the charge with X-rays.
We'll burn out the charges if you have the president.
What if I'm a little late?
No more Hartford Summit, and no more Snake Plissken.
When I get back, I'm gonna kill you.
Well, Mr. Russell, who, as you will have noticed, appears to suffer throughout the film from a severe case of laryngitis, poor fellow, is a former war hero gone to the bad. He'd just been sentenced to a life term in New York anyway, so what the hell, he agrees to play along with Mr. Van Cleef on the understanding that he'll be pardoned if he succeeds. The thing is, you see, that President Pleasance must be extricated within 24 hours because if he doesn't make a certain statement at an important summit conference, the whole world, to say nothing of Mr. Russell, will be blown to bits. An original idea? No, not very. Nor has it worked out in a terribly original way. The opportunity was there for John Carpenter, the director, to present us with a sharp satire, a parody of contemporary views of Manhattan as a place teeming even now with muggers and perverts. But he rather lets this go by in favour of a kind of animated comic strip full of grotesque villains, wild chases and a great deal of violence. The most interesting sociological point he makes is that in 1997 the New York subway is totally overrun by gangs of vicious loonies, which indicates at least that not too much has changed since 1981. However, here's Kurt Russell about to try to rescue the president.
What are you looking at?
Are you from the outside? Stop shaking. I can't. Who are you?
Alex and me, we've got to move fast.
Move fast. You goddamn right. I'll move fast.
Quiet.
Well, back to the drawing board. Escape from New York is now on in London and will no doubt appeal to those who like their escapism dripping with blood. I cannot, however, say even that much for Heaven's Gate, though the climax is bloody enough to be sure. By now, I imagine practically everyone knows the horror story of the making of Heaven's Gate, which started off at a budget of £5 million and under Michael Cimino's less than deft direction ended up costing the kind of sum you might expect to pay for the freehold of a small but well-established country. It was shown in New York and flopped and was then taken away and cut by an hour and re-edited and shown again and flopped, and now we've got it. As far as I can make out, it's about the persecution and eventual massacre of European immigrants by greedy cattlemen in Wyoming in 1890. But the way this re-edited version leaps about in time and place, it's not always easy to know precisely what is going on. Chris Christopherson plays a federal marshal on the side of the immigrants. Christopher Walken is a hired gun who doesn't seem to be entirely sure which side he's on. And the delicious Isabelle Huppert is superbly miscast as a whorehouse madam whose body belongs to anyone with a fistful of dollars, but whose heart is equally divided between Messrs. Christopherson and Walken. Sam Waterston gives a quite awful performance as the leader of the cattlemen, and John Hurt crops up, more or less inexplicably from time to time, as the local drunk, the fastest hip flask in the West. I have to say that the film, photographed by Vilmos Zsigmond, looks superb, but for an outlay of well over £20 million, that's about the least you'd expect. I suspect that Mr. Cimino was seeking to make an epic, like Gone with the Wind, but if that was so, he failed, for the wind he produced was not so much a tornado as a belch. Here are Messrs. Christopherson and Walken quarrelling over, among other things, Miss Huppert's favours.
Appreciate your job anymore, kid. He doesn't give a damn about you. He didn't see fit to even tell you himself.
Tell me what?
The association's got a death list. And your name's on it. Get up, Nate. I'm gonna whip your ass.
Stop, please, now!
You yet?
Stop, no, please, Jim, stop it. Ned, is it true?
Well, I swear to Christ, I don't even know what he's talking about. I asked you to be my wife, Ella.
You buy me things. He asked me to marry him.
Maybe it was always in my mind, too.
That's not good enough.
And so now to our location report on the filming of The French Lieutenant's Woman, original novel and a marvellous one at that by John Fowles, screenplay by Harold Pinter. The film was made towards the end of last year in Lyme Regis and London, with Carol Rice as the director. The book's been in print now for about 12 years, and in that time, directors like Fred Zinnemann, Mike Nichols, Franklin Schaffner and Richard Lester have all made equally abortive attempts to adapt it to the cinema. Well, it's a very complicated story, as you'll know if you've read it, and Rice and Pinter deserve at least a polite round of applause for getting it on the screen at all. The leading man in the film is the English actor Jeremy Irons, who's virtually unknown anywhere as a movie actor. But in this case, the leading man, begging Mr. Irons' pardon, is far less important than the leading lady. And for the title role, the shrewd Carol Rice chose Meryl Streep, who won an Oscar for her work in Kramer vs. Kramer, and who's generally regarded as just about the most interesting screen actress around at the moment. Of course, the French lieutenant's woman is supposed to be English, and Miss Streep is undoubtedly American, which causes one to wonder why exactly she got the part. Was it perhaps because Carol Rice knew her to be an eminently bankable star?
I'm not sure why he really chose me. Maybe it was because of the money that I brought from the studio. I would kill myself if I thought that. I think it probably had to do with some quality that he saw, and I never asked him what that was.
Well, we didn't go for an American actress, we went for Meryl. It's a very difficult and removed part. It needs an actress who's prepared and able to play beyond naturalism, beyond the normal limits of what screen acting is. She came here, I don't know, 12 weeks before we started shooting and did her homework and learned to speak with an English accent.
As a governess, she would try to lose the Dorset in her speech. And that she'd try to speak as perfectly as she could without being, you know, posh or anything. And that's what I tried to achieve.
Action.
Mrs. Pulteney, this is Miss Woodruff.
Ah. I see. I wish, as the vicar has told you, to take a companion. He has indicated to me that you might be a suitable person for such a post. You are without employment.
I am, Mum.
But you have education. You've been a governess.
I have, Mum.
Sarah's relationship to Mrs. Pulteney is crucial because it gives impetus to her real rebellion and moving out of where she was.
It's only one of the elements. There is, of course, the whole relationship with the respectability of the world to which Charles, her lover, belongs.
Yes, yes.
We meet a man who is very conventional, who lives by the standards of society. He is a Darwinist, but only in that area is he modern. And we see him getting engaged to a lady who is sweet and pretty in a very Victorian way. And then suddenly he meets this extraordinary woman who is a governess, a servant, who lingers in rather unacceptable places. And we see him blossom.
You seem to me an upright man. Let us shake hands. I started here, Charles, with my dear wife at my side. You know I have no son, Charles.
I do, sir, yes.
This is doubtless not the time to talk about it, but if you ever felt disposed to explore the world of commerce, I'd be delighted to be your guide.
Thank you.
This is the empire of Mr. Freeman, a very wealthy Victorian gent. In the novel, Mr. Freeman is a kind of Mr. Selfridge, and he represents the success, the expanding optimism of the tradesmen of Victorian times. One is always very much aware when one's making a period film that you don't want to make it picturesque, you want to make it expressive, and getting the balance of that right is rather tricky, I think.
And action! The times are on our side. This is the age of progress, Charles. Progress. Progress is like a lively horse. You either collar it or come a cropper. I am convinced that one day an empire of sorts will come to Ernestina and yourself, and thereafter to your children.
Good day for some.
John Fowles gave me, the only bit of advice he gave me about the part was that I should not explain it, ever. And I don't feel that I did explain her. And I think the essence of Sarah is that she just wants, and it's not really clear what it is, where, how, and to do what she needs to do.
Working with Meryl, absolute joy. Extraordinary lady, a lady who stretches me as an actor wonderfully. I keep looking at what she does and thinking, I've really got to be a great deal better if I'm to do anything with her.
The working relationship on the set was different from other films I've worked on, in that the script was law.
The whole notion of liberating yourself from the constrictions of your time, the whole notion of love and taboos, and it's a classic story and a wonderfully told one.
I don't know whether this has occurred to you, but the name Meryl Streep neither looks nor sounds real or even probable. I think it's an anagram, and what I think I'll do is I'll start spreading a rumour that she actually started out as an actor called Peter Merlis, who only found fame after a sex change operation. Doesn't do her justice, but if nothing else, it should do quite a lot for the film's box office potential. Anyway, The French Lieutenant's Woman opens in London on October the 15th, and I'll be reviewing it then. Meanwhile, what we have at the moment is Tarzan the Apeman, starring the spectacularly pretty Bo Derek as Jane and the spectacularly muscular Miles O'Keeffe as Tarzan. The most exciting pair in the jungle, say the newspaper advertisements. And looking at Mr. O'Keeffe's pectorals, I suppose it's a justifiable claim, though hers aren't bad either. However, the basis of the film is that Miss Derrick has joined her father, Richard Harris, the well-known explorer, in an expedition to find the ape-man Tarzan. The year is 1910, and Miss Derrick, who is generations ahead of women's lib in that she never wears a bra and not often knickers either, is not surprisingly the first to attract Tarzan's attention as she splashes about in a lake. I've lost count of the times the Tarzan stories have been filmed since Elmo Lincoln played the ape-man way back in 1918. The most famous casting, of course, from 1932 onwards was of Johnny Weissmuller as Tarzan and Maureen O'Sullivan as Jane, and there have been umpteen screen versions since those two broke up. But this is surely the first in which Tarzan and Jane come on like Kinky and Quirky. "You're more beautiful," says Jane, licking her lips as she stalks the nervous ape-man, "than any girl I've ever known." Well, this immediately makes you wonder what sort of capers she'd been getting up to before hitting the jungle. Indeed, the whole picture's a bit on the steamy side, what with Jane enjoying a vaguely incestuous relationship with the over-emoting Mr. Harris, and between cavorting topless with an excitable orangutan being captured by native women who lovingly wash and paint her all over. Possibly shocked by all these goings-on, the innocent Tarzan is stricken quite dumb. I mean, he's always a man of few words, but he usually says something if it's only "me Tarzan, you Jane." Here he doesn't say a word. Apart from uttering the obligatory jungle yodel, he doesn't even grunt. Nor, as far as I could see, does he change expression. The result of all this is that you begin to feel that the film might more aptly have been entitled Jane the Ape Person. Furthermore, with Richard Harris hamming away like mad on one side and Miles O'Keeffe apparently stricken with premature rigor mortis from the neck up on the other, it's almost possible to delude yourself that Miss Derrick can really act. In this, however, you would be mistaken. As photographed and directed by her husband John Derrick, she strips nicely and looks lovely, and let's leave it at that, shall we? Anyway, here's the very forward Jane recalling her father's words while making suggestive advances to the apprehensive ape-man.
James Parker, you might be right. You might want me. You just might. James Parker. It's wicked, I know. But I hope you're right.
James Parker! He's looking for me.
You know, give him 6 months and he might find out how that toy works. Miles O'Keefe, perhaps, but not necessarily Miles O'Brain. Well, the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate complained in an American court about the nudity in the film, and 4 minutes of the scene in which Jane is washed and painted by the native women was cut out by order of a federal judge. I understand that those 4 minutes now constitute the hottest-selling videotape in the United States. Meanwhile, in this country, Tarzan the Apeman, minus the 4 minutes, is out on general release and might prove suitable for those who like a bit of titillation but don't feel ready for real pornography yet. I don't think it has much to offer for genuine Tarzan fans, though. Indeed, of all the films around at the moment, the one that I think has most to offer generally is The Four Seasons, a pleasing and thoughtful comedy about friendship. It's the story of three couples, Alan Alda and Carol Burnett, Len Cariou and Sandy Dennis, and Jack Weston and Rita Moreno, who, through the 4 seasons of the year, go on holidays and long weekends together. But this cosy setup is dramatically disturbed when Mr. Cariou abandons Miss Dennis and on the next communal holiday aboard a yacht in the Virgin Islands brings in her stead the youthful Bess Armstrong.
Did anyone sleep last night?
Kidding, right? With all those mating calls coming from the master bedroom?
All night long.
I mean, who could have guessed that it would be so distressing to listen to other people humping?
Hi, gang.
Morning.
Morning?
Ah. What a morning. Oh, boy. Smell that air, huh?
Yeah.
Now, this is how the whole world should live.
Uh-huh.
I slept like a baby last night. Wasn't that a great night?
Oh, yeah, that was great, yeah.
Wasn't it peaceful, bobbing around on the water like that?
Yeah, well, some parts of the boat bob more than others.
Hey, honey, throw on your suit and come on up. Coffee's on.
Hi.
Morning.
Morning. Did anybody hear anything about the weather?
Oh, yeah. Did you listen to the radio yet?
Yeah, it's supposed to be clear.
What do you say after breakfast we head for St. Croix?
Wait a minute. You want to move the boat?
Come on. Once you get used to it, you'll be the most intrepid sailor of the bunch.
I don't see how we're going to go anywhere unless we can get the anchor up.
Well, we'll just pull it up.
Pull it up? Isn't that why we had to stay here last night? Because we couldn't pull the anchor up?
Nah, if the three of us give it a yank, it'll come up. Come on.
You boys go pull on your anchor for a while. We'll be back here. If that anchor comes out of the water, there is no God.
Well, the replacement of the familiar Miss Dennis by the new and enviably young Miss Armstrong throws the relationship between the three couples subtly off balance. How should the others react to Miss Armstrong, or she to them? And how should they all now react to the deserted Miss Dennis? Most of them, after all, are middle-class, middle-aged and prosperous. They don't like change. It makes them uneasy and makes them look a little harder at their own lives. As writer, director and leading player, Alan Alda works it all out wittily, compassionately and satisfactorily. The Four Seasons is an amusing, intelligent film about nice, intelligent people, and that alone makes it a refreshing change from most of the other stuff on offer. Here now are Mr. Alda and Miss Burnett caught up in a domestic row that's caused at least in part by the unsettling influence of Miss Armstrong after a communal bruising game of touch football.
You're the one who organizes these trips.
And I hate it. Doesn't it ever occur to you that sometimes I'd like to be the one with the sore knee?
No. You handle everything like three of the most efficient people I know. Nobody can do what you do. My God, you're perfect.
How dare you call me that?
How dare I call you perfect?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes. Isn't that what
Perfect?
I heard?
What's wrong with perfect? How can you get upset about that?
Because when I'm perfect, I cease to exist. You don't have to hug me when I'm low. You don't have to cheer me up with a bunch of $2 daffodils. Nothing.
I don't surprise you with daffodils.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
I do. You know I do.
When you feel like it. When it makes you feel good, but not when I need them.
God damn it. I'm standing here bleeding. Blood is running down my leg, and we're talking about daffodils.
Because I also resent you for hurting yourself.
Oh, and that's not irrational, huh?
You think I like to see you so jealous of Nick that you feel you have to tackle him? You think that makes me feel good?
I think we should get to the heart of this.
The heart of this is that you wish you had some blonde nymph adoring you like he does. So go on, go find one. Christ, how long are you going to hang on to these fantasies? The reality is you're married to a middle-aged woman with a good sense of humor and dry skin. And if you don't like it, then go find yourself a nymph. Just do me the courtesy of telling me. In other words, and I mean this in the most loving way, shit or get off the pot.
Well, The Four Seasons is now out on release, and it provides the inspiration for this week's competition. Very simple it is too. I'm going to show you 4 brief sequences from 4 films, each of which contains the name of one of the 4 seasons in its title. All you have to do is tell me what those titles are. So here we go.
You know, I know. I know, you know, I know. We know, Henry knows. And Henry knows we know it. We're a knowledgeable family.
You must be kidding. Look how dark it is. And listen to that wind.
And a happy time we'll have there, one and all at the Ugly Bug Ball.
OK, what you do now is let me know the titles of those 4 films on a postcard, and by Friday, please. The address, as usual, is Film 81, BBC Television Centre, London, W12 8QT. The winner will receive a video cassette of the science fiction thriller Alien, and the runners-up will get our brand new and hugely coveted T-shirts. And that brings us very nearly to the end of this first programme of the new series. Nearly, but not quite, because I just have time to mention Escape to Victory, a POW camp melodrama directed in, I can only assume, a fit of absent-mindedness by John Huston. The plot is as follows. Nice German Max von Sydow, a former soccer international, challenges portly POW Michael Caine, who is also, we're asked to believe, a former soccer international, though he hardly looks fit enough even for a strenuous game of table football, to raise a team of fellow prisoners to play the local German troops. Nasty Nazis build the whole thing up into a massive propaganda exercise, and the match is staged at the Colombe Stadium in Paris. Poor Mr. Caine's task as captain and trainer of the POW team is much complicated by his senior officer's insistence that he should use the big game as cover for an escape attempt, and also by the unwanted presence in his side of Sylvester Stallone as a goalkeeper who's clearly modelled his game on that of the ancient mariner who stoppeth 1 in 3. Fortunately, he also has in his team several real footballers such as Bobby Moore and Pelé, who at least provide some authentic-looking soccer before the whole thing comes to an improbable conclusion. So for now, and until next Monday night at 10:45, I'll leave you with a glimpse of that. Goodbye.
To give this advantage to the Germans. Go on, Sid. Go on, Sid. Sid. In the middle. You go, out you go. Come on. Hang on, Paul. Back on, Tanya. Good tackle, Terry.